Thank you for tuning in to Uncommon Women. On this episode, we have the honor to interview a fellow single mother who is a warrior that holds it down for her and her beautiful daughter. Alethea is in her early 30s and has raised her 8-year-old daughter in a single-parent household since she was born. Alethea graduated with her associates last May and currently attends college for her bachelor's in business management administration. She currently works in home lending at a financial institution, and in the evenings and weekends, she continues to empower women to be strong and embrace who they were created to be. She recently held a women's conference last March called Slay Day, which stands for Spread Love All Year. So, Alethea, tell me about a time where you have grown significantly in your life.
Well, first, let me start by saying thank you so much for having me. I am very happy to be here. So as far as a time in my life where my character grew significantly, it came from actually a very painful experience. Later on in my 20s, I got in a very serious relationship after not being in one, for quite some time. And the relationship itself started off great. But then there were always signs that something wasn't quite right, and I feel like as women, we do that. We also know we have these feelings and you just know when something's off. And like I'm sure everybody can relate to, I pushed it off and it finally got to the point where his disloyalty was undeniable, is pretty much in my face. And I acted out. My temper has always been one of my biggest flaws, and it was pretty ugly. And the funny thing was, and not that it was funny in the moment, but funny now looking back at it, is that he used my acting out as a manipulation tactic to now diverge the focus from his bad behaviors and his actions. He now moved it from that to my reaction and what my reaction was. And, we long story short, we stayed together after that, but we would have more conversations about not allowing someone else's actions to impact who you were and not allowing them to pull a reaction out of you. So, we talk about it and needless to say, his infidelity didn't stop there. It continued a few more times, but again, he would try to talk me out of it or manipulate the situation. And, when it's something that you don't want to face, I think it's easier for us to be talked out of it and be talked out of what we're feeling and what we know to be true and just not being ready to face those truths quite yet. And it got to a point where it was no longer deniable. I wasn't happy. There'd be times where he wouldn't make it home and he'd say, oh, he fell asleep somewhere or he passed out somewhere or something came up and this happened. And it was that feeling in the pit of my stomach every time I'd fall asleep and I'd wake up and I'd look to the left or look to the right of me, I should say, and it was like, oh, yep, he's not here yet. And then just getting that feeling like, well, where is he? Is everything okay? And I think the defining moment for that was there was a point in time where he had disappeared for his birthday. He basically told me last minute he was leaving and going out of town. And I was so confused. And the way that he did it was just so deceitful. And it was funny because I knew when he was supposed to come back, or around the time he was supposed to come back, and I ended up having a dream, and the dream kind of led me to the point where I woke up from my sleep and I could not fall back to sleep. And long story short, it ended up being put in my face that not only did he leave for his birthday, but he took another woman with him that was not me. And I had to face some harsh realities. My initial reaction was to flip out, like it was utterly disrespectful to say the least. This is somebody that I would have gone to the ends of the earth for and back countless times, and it made me kind of think, wow, like what did I do to deserve this? Where did I go wrong? And as women, I think it's important to know that it's not always about us doing anything wrong. It's just, you have to learn to meet people where they're at. And unfortunately, where he was at in that moment wasn't in a relationship, or at least not a faithful one, with me. So instead of looking at it and pulling all those hard feelings inward, sometimes we have to just accept it and just say, it's not me. I didn't do anything wrong. But I ended up leaving instead of reacting right away. And he wasn't even aware at this point that he was caught. That's not what I think was the funniest part about it, is that he didn't even know that I knew. And I went to work like everything was okay. I was sad, and I just remember like crying and like breaking down because I was furious. And my anger has always been, again, it's always been a flaw. And I was like, I refuse to allow him to manipulate the situation and make me feel like I'm the bad guy. So how am I going to work this? How am I going to maneuver this? It was now time to be logical and not emotional. When I run, anybody who knows me, I run off of very high emotion all the time. If I'm happy, you know it. If I'm sad, you see it. If I'm mad, you definitely see that. So it was time to say, okay, you gotta use your thinking cap on this one. And how are you going to work it? So I did. I went to work. And he had the audacity to text me and say, I seen I missed some of your calls. And I thought to myself, oh, you mean the 50 something calls while you were out of town? Got it. And it just annoyed me that he acted like everything was fine and everything was okay. So I showed up to where he was at, and I remember bursting through the door once he answered it where he was. And I was like, so you ready to be honest yet? And he just had this confused look on his face. And as much as I wanted to flip out, I just wouldn't allow it. I was like, I'm not going to let him have the upper hand this time. I'm not going to allow him to use this against me. I didn't do anything wrong here. I was home crying my eyes out while he was out living more than his best life with someone else. So, it took that situation, and, we argued a bit, but I didn't curse. I didn't yell. I think the worst thing I said was, as I was leaving, I let him know that I would, get together anything that was at my house, that he didn't have to worry about coming and get it. I would politely take my key right there in that moment. But I think the worst thing I said was walking out of the door. I told him that if I died tomorrow, I wouldn't want him at my funeral. And although it was a bit over the top and dramatic, I wanted him to know the severity. Like, I wanted to know how deep I was hurt without yelling and screaming or crying, because he was already used to that with me. It didn't faze him anymore. Maybe the first time it might have stung a little bit, but it didn't faze him the same. And honestly, walking away was one of the hardest things I had to do, especially because I don't really go for the whole make up the breakup. It's either, if you're going to be together and figure it out together. If you're going to walk away, walk away. But don't walk away so somebody chases after you, And although I guess looking back in that moment, I would have wanted him to chase me. I would have wanted him to realize what he was missing out on, what he was losing by me leaving and by his actions. I wanted him to understand the severity of the consequences. And I don't think he did. I mean, honestly, maybe he never will. But
let me ask you this. How did you get the courage to go to the house, knock on the door, have your composure and be done.
That's tough.
Because so many women are cheated over and over and over and over again because they're so emotionally bound in a relationship with someone they love. They just don't want to let go. How did you find the courage to say, that's it?
Well, I think we all have our own breaking point. I think that I think our limits are set a little bit differently. I think for me, the biggest impact for me was, I remember sitting in my room, and I was laying on my bed just crying, and this was honestly, even briefly, I want to say this was while he was away. Like, there was no even confirmation that he was with anyone else, let alone another woman. But I was laying in my room crying, and my daughter walked in. And at the time, she was about 5. And she had asked me why I was crying. And she said, "Don't cry, Mommy," which made me cry even harder. Because now I realized that the person that I was trying to protect most in this world, and that I thought I had protected at this point, I didn't think that she seen this. I didn't think that she knew what was going on. That was my reality, that she knew. She was fully aware. Maybe not of the situation, maybe not the infidelity, but the feelings around it, the sadness, the emptiness, the anger. She felt it. She knew me as her mom, I was not right. And I wasn't the person that had raised her for the past 5 years. So her asking me that was a reality check to me to say, you have to do better because you have somebody watching you. And how, she's 8 now, but in the future, obviously, God willing, she'll grow up to a beautiful young woman. But how could I tell her to have standards and set standards for herself, and to not allow anybody to treat her any less than the queen that I think she is, if I couldn't even do that for myself? I think as parents, we have a do as I say, not as I do mentality. And we don't tend to realize that our children will more than likely fall into the cycle of what they see. Some of what we told them will stick in their head, but at some point when they develop their own stable rationale, they'll step in and say, "Well, wait a minute. Mom, you told me not to smoke, but you smoke. How's that fair? You're a hypocrite." And I just didn't want to be that person. So I think, coming to the conclusion of him being back in town, being faced now with another infidelity, and knowing for sure, it was like, I can't keep doing this. I can't. And if I'm being honest, I wanted him to come back. I wanted him to fight to stay in my life. If I would have had it my way at that point in time, I would have. And as I didn't know, even though I was the one that left, and even though there was strength within that moment, and there was strength with staying gone, there were plenty of moments of weakness within those to get to those moments of strength. It was plenty of countless times crying, only now I tried to be more conscious of where and when I cried and where my daughter was at that point in time. But I still cried. I still hurt. My love didn't change. I still loved him just as much as I did, it's funny because that term fall in love, in some situations, I feel like I stumbled in love. I didn't mean to fall in love with this man. I just did. And at one point early on, he made me feel safe. And he made me feel like I could take some of the weight off of my shoulders. And he was willing to take it. And I didn't have to ask. He just knew. And it was, as a single mom, that's a great feeling. That's a great feeling when someone comes in and says, "Let me help you." Because more often than not, we have grown accustomed to not asking for help. And it becomes a routine. You know, you almost go into autopilot and you don't think twice about it. So when someone comes in and they're helping and they're not just talking, but they're giving you the actions behind it, it consumes you and you're like, I will do anything for you. This is great. So although my love didn't change, I just came to the rationale that was like, he's not trying to change. He's not valuing me or the relationship or anything else at this point in time. And I had to be okay with it. And at that point, I think pride kind of stepped in. And I had to figure out how to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. You know, without all the king's horses and without all the king's men.
How did you bounce back from, like, that was probably one of the lowest moments of your life. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure we all have low moments, but that's something that is super impactful. How did you get the courage to bounce back from it?
Well, I found courage in different places. I found strength in different places. I had really opened myself up. I realized that I had numbed myself a very, very long time ago, from other things in my past, you know, not him at this point, but earlier on. And there were so many emotions and things that were underlying that were kind of locked away in a secret room that most people didn't even know about, let alone find the key. And he had the key. And he unlocked it and he opened this door. And the emotions hit me like a tsunami coming to land. You know, it's this big tidal wave that crashes over you that you can't stop, but you see it coming. And all you can do is be tousled around and hope you survive it, you know, and hope that you learn how to surf and you come out on top. And for me, I shut down initially. I did. I went to work. I dove into work. It was even hard for me to be around my daughter sometimes, not because I didn't love her, not because I didn't want to be around her, but I didn't want her to see me like that. I didn't know what to do with myself. It was hard for me to get up day in and day out and take a shower, put clothes on, you know, let alone come home, cook dinner, and do all my mom stuff. And even my friends, I had friends of mine that I've always been people's go-to. I've always been the one that people can come to for advice, and I'll normally help them before I'll ever help myself. So to see me so weak and not want to move off my sofa, I had friends that were uncomfortable in my sadness because they didn't know how to deal with me. They've never seen me so broken. And I just had to tell people, like, just let me be. You know, there were times before in my past where I was hurt and I would be like, I'm going to go out, I'm going to get dressed and I'm going to feel pretty, or I'm going to, you know, we do the rebound thing where even if it's not necessarily about sleeping with someone else, but just allowing someone else to have your attention so you're not paying attention to what you're feeling and you're not paying attention to missing the person that you love. And I was like, I don't want to do it that way this time. I want to do it different. I'm going to feel it until I no longer feel it. I don't care how long it takes. I'm going to keep fighting and I'm going to keep pushing. I dove into church and trying to better my relationship with God, even though I had one, but it was more of a homebound one. Like God and I talked on our own time. But I dove into church more just, if for nothing else, for the positive vibes. And when I first started going, some of the sermons that the pastor was preaching, I felt like they were meant for me. Like I was meant to hear those words. And I would walk out of there and I'd feel great. And I'd feel great for a couple of hours. And then as time went on, I'd feel great for a day. Then I felt great for a couple of days. And little by little, I started to tap into me again because I had lost me. And I don't know when I did, or maybe I never really knew who I was. But I started trying to figure out who I was as a woman, as a mother, as a daughter, as a friend, as an individual. Who was I? So I started looking outward and started just trying to do things different. I remember walking to the museum and just putting my headphones in by myself. I didn't ask anybody to go with me. I walked there. I walked through by myself. And I put on classical music. And I would just embrace me.
That's so good.
I started reading a lot more. I started to just try to tap into different things. I started writing a lot more. And really finding releases and outlets that were positive instead of negative, especially given at this point, by this time I was 30, when that breakup had all finally came to a head. I was 30 years old, and a single mom and a homeowner and all these things. And it's like we wear all these titles and we tend to wear all these hats to be a person that everybody else needs us to be, but never really are who we need us to be. It's almost like sometimes we're afraid to do that, or we feel selfish if we do that. How do you tell somebody else no for your own sanity? You know it's for your sanity, but if you're good at hiding it all, people would never know the difference. People didn't know half the stuff that I was feeling on the outside. What I was actually feeling on the inside based on what I portrayed on the outside. They didn't know until I couldn't control it anymore. Till I couldn't hide it anymore. At this point, it had overcame me. And I had to accept that I wanted to be better. I wanted to be different. I had to want to make the change. And I think that's an important part for anybody listening to know, is that you have to be ready. It's not when your friends want you to be ready, when your family wants you to be ready. You have to be ready to dive into yourself fully. Feel yourself and all your emotions. Accept the things that you've gone through, mistakes you might have made, or things that maybe you're not so pleased with yourself for, you might even be ashamed for. You have to accept them. It's a part of your journey. Take accountability, but don't be afraid to move on from that. A moment in time does not define you in the grand scheme of things. We go through things, we make choices based off of where we're at in life at that time. And we tend to forget that we've been through stuff before and we survived it. And there's a reason why you're still here. You just have to find out what that purpose is. But you have to dig deeper in finding that, because if you allow the world to put their titles on you and you allow the outside world's opinions to allow you to form your opinions about yourself, you're constantly going to be in a vicious cycle and battle within yourself. You have to at some point know who you are. And I think as women, we always second guess ourselves. I still do. I'm not going to make it seem like I never do that. And when the emotion goes to take over, I kind of have to stop myself, embrace myself, and say, self, now, let's be logical here. Let's take away some of the emotion. Let's accept that you've been through things. You've gone through things. You're going to continue to go through things, God willing, as long as you're still alive tomorrow. But they could always be worse. Take the lesson learned and keep moving forward more than anything else.
So now that you went through that whole situation, reflecting back, because it's been a few years since that happened, what strength have you gained that you're able to grow from, move forward from, and not accept another relationship of such deep betrayal?
As far as my strength, like I said, it was finally that somebody stepped in and told me that my behavior was wrong. Previously people would just accept me for who I was, and they knew if you didn't poke the sleeping bear, they wouldn't attack you. So it wasn't until that whole situation that, and it being used against me, that I said, okay, you have to make some changes. So the strength that I think that I got from it more than anything else is that I was able to look back and say, You're not going to allow people to pull you out of character. It's not about, you have to allow people to be who they are. The only person that you can control is yourself. It doesn't mean, though, that you have to run around like a banshee, screaming and yelling and acting crazy and just to get a result. You can actually stay calm, keep a calm tone of voice, not curse, not act a fool and embarrass yourself, and still get great results. You know, we don't have to automatically go into attack mode, and that's one thing that I think that I've gotten a lot better at, is that now I take a step back. Before, I just reacted. Like, I didn't even think about it. I wouldn't think about it until afterward and was like, yeah, probably wasn't the best thing I could have did. But I just would react. Now I try to take a step back, think about it a little bit more, and then move forward. And, you know, it's been better for me. It's been better for my daughter because I had so much to lose. Like I said, I was a homeowner, a single mom. If my daughter didn't have me, who did she have? You know, I have a support system, but there's nothing like having your mom, you know, and having your whole life be ripped away off of one stupid decision that you allow somebody to pull out of you. It just doesn't seem fair. And ultimately, you know, if I had to think about it, and I would have to think how to even express that to other people, you know, and not to experience those same feelings or those same situations. It's like at some point we have to take accountability for who we are and what we put ourselves through. Although my ex was the one that performed all the infidelities, you know, even though he was the one out doing it, my heartbreak was partly my responsibility too. Yes, he hurt my feelings. Yes, he betrayed me. Yes, he lied. But I betrayed me too, if I was being honest. So, am I mad now anymore? No. Did it take me a long time to get here? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because nobody likes being betrayed. Nobody likes feeling like I'd give you the world and you'd give me crap in return. Nobody wants to feel that. But at the same time, if I'm being honest with myself, there were red flags pretty early on in the relationship. And even though I acted childishly and I acted out, you know, the first real time that I kind of caught him up, so to speak, I didn't have to allow myself to be manipulated through that situation. I didn't have to allow him to kind of talk me off the ledge by, you know, turning the focus on me and my reaction versus his actions. I could have left. I could have avoided all of that pain and all of that heartbreak had I just acknowledged that I deserved better. And I didn't. You know, I think sometimes we get so caught up in other people and what value we think they're bringing to our lives. But we don't sit back and take accountability and say, how did you get here? It's easy to pass blame. Oh, it's so easy to play the blame game and say, you know what, it's your fault I'm like this, and it's your fault that I feel like this. And a lot of the time, even though those people contribute to how we feel or what we're going through, we created this. We added to our own misery and our own self-destruction. It's funny because a friend of mine and I, we always talk and we always say, you have two options. You can let go or you can be dragged. And it's up to you to decide what you're going to do. If you hold on right now, if you go outside and you hold on to the back of somebody's car, you holding on to that back bumper is not going to stop that car from moving if it is engaged with the key in the ignition, turned on, and then the car then put into drive. You're not going to stop the car. The car is going to move where the car is going to move. You can't stop the driver from driving off. However, what you can decide is how long you're going to hold on for. If a person wants to leave, they'll show you in their actions. It's not about what they say. It's about how they treat you. So, if a person shows you that they don't value you and they show you that they're okay with not having you around, because their actions will tell you that, are you going to let go? Or are you going to continue to hold on to that moving car that's trying to get away from you just for the sake of being near it? So I think that's where we have to just, again, it all comes back down to accountability and being accountable and holding your friends accountable or your family accountable when they, when they tell themselves their own stories, make them tell themselves and give themselves their truths. Just like us, as individuals, we have to give ourselves our truths. We have to face them. We have to be okay with being in those moments and accepting accountability and saying, yeah, that person hurt me, but I hurt me too. And then letting it go and forgiving yourself and moving on. Because I've also found that it's really easy, maybe not easy, but it's easier done to forgive others than what we tend to forgive ourselves for. For the self-inflictions, for the self-inflicted wounds that we've caused, that we've watched heal and then scar up. It's easy to pass blame, but at some point, we can't anymore. You have to take accountability for who you are and what you put yourself through.
That's so true, A. At some point, you have to stand, take responsibility, take accountability, acknowledge where you went wrong, stop pointing the blame game, stop pointing the fingers, check your heart, and then move on. Use that information that you are identifying as a strength to not find yourself in a similar situation or going around the same mountain or experiencing insanity, doing the same thing, expecting a different result. There's a point in time where you have to stand, not play the victim card, and be like, yeah, I messed up. Yeah, I could have handled this differently. Yeah, I don't want to go through that again. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. Based off your situation, what would you want other women to know?
I want women to know that they're powerful, more powerful than they typically even believe that they are. I want them to know that, your heartbreaks and the trials and tribulations in your life all help lead you to a greater purpose at some point. You just have to keep fighting through it. At some point you have to decide when you want to tap into your greatness, and when you're ready to accept that. Like I said, I am probably more of a spiritual person than a religious person. But I do believe in God. And, for whatever higher power anybody believes in, I believe that our paths are designed for us. And you're not going to be able to receive blessings that you're not ready to receive yet. I always laugh because obviously social media is a big thing now, right? And I always see this meme and I think back on it a little bit more, and it's always this young child holding a teddy bear, and in the meme that I'm talking about, Jesus is standing in the meme with a bigger teddy bear hidden behind his back, and the child is saying, but I want this one, I like this one. And how often do we do that in life, that we hold on to things and we hold on to people because we just don't want to let them go. We want what we want, even though sometimes we know it's not good for us and we don't know what's coming. Sometimes you have to let things and people go to be able to reach the heights that you're supposed to reach. Sometimes people are anchors and not feathers contributed to your wings to fly. And it's okay to take a step back. It's okay to separate yourself from the typical or the norm of your everyday life. It's okay to take a step back from your friends. It's okay to take a step back from your family. It's okay to be selfish for the sake of your own sanity. There's too often than not, we jump in and we save the day and we put this cape on every day, We do all these things and we don't think about how they impact us. And if we're not in the right state of mind, you can't help anyone else. You have to help you before you help anyone else. Because if you don't, you're going to continue in these same cycles. And I don't want to see that for people. Women, for so long, women have fought so hard. If you look at history, if you look at, rights, if you would have taken us back, so many years ago, it was intended for women to be barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. Women didn't work. Women didn't vote. Women didn't do a lot of things. And we as women have fought so hard for equality. But yet, we started tapping into a new power and not using the power that we already had. And when I say that, I mean that I hear so many women now talk about, the generation. And yes, the times have changed. People aren't getting married as young. Relationships, people aren't staying in marriages even when they do get entered in them. They don't fight how they used to fight. And it's okay, don't get me wrong. It is okay to fight when both parties are fighting to stay together for the one common goal of being better. But at what point, again, do you just trace back on your own accountability and kind of just say, okay, I'm going to be better. And, we all have this mentality now, again, where we blame men for how society is and how dating is. But we don't look at us as women and say how women have changed. I know so many women that are out here fighting to be like a man. You're not a man. You are a woman. And that is your power. And we have way more control than I think sometimes we realize. You are free to go out and do whatever you want to do. And trust me, this isn't about judgment because I judge no one. I encourage every woman to tap into their happiness, whatever that means for them. But I'll hear women that want to be married and want a husband one day, maybe not today, but one day. I'll hear them say that, but in the next breath or within their character or how they maneuver, they don't move like a wife. Men, I'm a very firm believer that men will only do with what we allow. People in general in your life, people will only do what you allow them to get away with. When do you put your foot down and take control of your life? When do you set the standard for what you will and won't accept? And not allow people to color outside those lines. That's what I want women to know. Is that they can be great. You can be amazing. Whether that's with someone by your side, whether it's a best friend, a family member, or a significant other. But sometimes you got to do it alone. You can be your own superhero, which is a big part of what I talked about in Slay Day this past March, was just, I want women to understand that we all have our individual superpowers. And my superpowers don't take away from your superpowers. If we got to a point where we started lifting each other and sticking together as a whole versus being in constant competition or secret competition or always being catty, if we truly and genuinely supported each other, we could go so much further in life. So much further.
So tell me about Slay Day. So Slay Day is an acronym for
Spread Love All Year, is what I developed that to end up meaning. Funny thing is, I came up with Slay Day from Slay series. Now, anybody who follows me on social media, especially Facebook, I think it was more promoted there. A couple years back, in the mix of kind of going through healing, I decided that I wanted to make my birthday about more than just me. And I kind of got the idea from a friend of mine who she went and had her own birthday project. And mine ran a little bit differently, but it was still about promoting random acts of kindness. And I asked some of my girlfriends, I told them I don't want to party. I don't want to go out and party. But if you want to contribute anything to my birthday, I'm going to put this project together and I want you guys to be a part of it. So throughout doing these random acts of kindness, I recorded them and I compiled the whole video and I put it out and it was great. And the girls were so happy that I made them do it. I got a lot of great feedback from the community. I had friends that were even mad at me that I didn't ask them to participate. And it wasn't because I didn't think that they would be for it. I just kind of didn't ask them because I knew that you'd have to be up and moving by like 6 a.m. on a Saturday. And some of my friends still like to go out and party. And I don't judge them for that. Again, you got to meet people where they are. So I met them where I thought they were. But that was my fault because I made assumptions. And honestly, I think with it being my first time, that project would have been a mess had I involved too many people.
So what kind of things did you do
on your birthday? We ended up, oh gosh, what did we do? Initially, I went out and bought 110 Get Well Soon balloons. And I funded this completely myself. And we wrote out, my best friend and I wrote out Get Well Soon cards. We wrote them all out by hand and took them to the local rehabilitation center. Because people apparently don't stay in hospitals anymore. If you're there for more than like a week, they ship you off to the rehab center. So I had called, I got the number ahead of time, but then I took flowers for the staff and wrote them a thank you card because let's face it, people get sick every day and it takes a special kind of person to take care of sick people. When I'm on the up and up, I can gladly look to help my friends when they're down and they're going through something mentally. I'm better with mental and emotional things. But when somebody's physically hurting and physically aching, and that's tough, man. That is tough. And I am a firm believer that it takes a special type of person to do that. So I wanted to acknowledge them too and let them know that they were appreciated because without them, that place wouldn't be possible. So I did that. I ended up buying the girls like breakfast on the go. Just Wawa food and coffee. Something small, but it was something to let them know that I appreciate them and that you have to eat with the people that you surround yourself with,
Mm-hmm. Break bread.
If you are lifted to the next level, reach back down and grab someone else. Each one pulls one, and kind of sticking with that motto more than anything else. From there, I had put money together, change, and put like little messages and cards of paying it forward, and stuck the money around different places in a local laundromat. Because again, it's something that we take for granted. We take for granted if you can go and just wash your clothes and you have the money to wash your clothes. When some people are washing their clothes by hand and hanging them in their bathroom, or there's just little things like that we take for granted. What else did we do? We ended up getting they look like little baseball jerseys and dad hats, and we supported a local store by doing that. It was a local printer. That had printed everything out for us, and we paid them, we supported them, we highlighted that even more. We went up to City Park, and I think between all of us, we collected 5 big major bags of trash. And when we were all said and done, the girls thanked me, and they felt great for it. And my point of what I wanted to show them is that sometimes it's not the large gesture that makes the most impact. Sometimes it's little small tidbits. Holding the door for someone. Smiling at a stranger. Because, God forbid we smile anymore. Things like that. They matter to people. Because you don't know what anybody else is going through in that moment. You don't know what their struggles are. And I think it's important to address that. We live in such a selfish world anymore. Everybody has a what's in it for me attitude instead of helping each other, lifting each other, encouraging each other, especially in the wonderful world of women. So Slay Day kind of got birthed from Slay Series. Slay Series was the original, and at that point in time, Slay was just about women going out and killing it and being great, and Spread Love All Year developed far after even Slay Day even took place, because I was like, I like Slay, but I want it to mean something. I want it to mean more. I want people to know what it means when they see it, and not just have their own interpretation. It's very clear. It's very concise. But Slay Day initially came from Slay Series. And I just remember when I was broken down and when I was feeling broken down and I was in the process of rebuilding myself, one of the things, because I was already in a vulnerable place and I was okay with talking with more people and being more vulnerable, which I wasn't really open to before. I stuck to my circle, I stuck to what I knew, and that was it. Because my belief was always, if you allow people in and you allow people to see the weakness, you're handing them the tools that they can eventually use to hurt you. But they can only hurt you if you allow them to. If you know your truths, typically you're okay. You can stand firm in that. At that point in time, though, previously I wasn't. So given that I was so vulnerable, I was just looking for an outlet, and I was almost looking for anything. I was desperate, I think, to feel better. So I started talking to different people that I wouldn't have normally talked to. I started having conversations with people that I wouldn't have normally had. And I found that how I was feeling was a lot more common than what I realized. It's amazing the things that you can find out if you actually just have a conversation with someone else, even if it's a stranger. And I did that. And I found how common it was. And I said, I'd like to put something together for women locally. And I want to allow them to showcase what they do. And I want to give them a platform to showcase themselves. And I also want to reach the people who need it. I want women to embrace their superpowers and not be afraid to use them if need be. So I'm not even going to lie. I initially second guessed myself. And I said, all right, just pick a date. Just pick a date. What date are you going to use? And then my mom's birthday is the 11th. And I was like, you know what? Why not make this on a day for one of the most strongest women I know, and a woman who impacted my life greatly. And it was about, I want to say it was about December. And I was like, well, let me see if I could get the day. And I couldn't get her specific day, but I got a week later. I said, let me see if I could find a venue. So I looked into venues on that day, and I was like, okay, now let me look into this. And little by little, the pieces just fit, and again, I think that's part of the reason too that I'm such a firm believer of anything that's meant for you, you will have. You will have. Sometimes you have to just take a deep breath, have a little bit of patience, which is also not my strong suit. But, take a step back, have some patience, and allow the magic to work. Allow yourself to just be who you are. So that's how Slay Day was formed. It came together. I started doing my homework. I had a few meltdowns in between because I wanted it to be great. I've had conversations with my friends in the past, and they tell me how good they feel with being able to have conversations with me. I don't know, maybe it's one of my gifts. And I wanted to be able to spread that same feeling to the masses. I wanted to touch as many people as I could. And for me, I didn't care who you were. If you were willing to purchase a ticket and sit in that seat, it meant that you were trying to take a step in the right direction. And I wasn't going to shut that down. And going into it, I wasn't going to deal with the cattiness. I had a 0 tolerance policy. My biggest fear was women coming in groups of who they were already comfortable with and then not really growing because they stuck to what they knew. But I had a few tricks up my sleeve that I came up with to break all that up. And I did. And I was so grateful. And after Slay Day was over, my heart was so full, you know, and it wasn't just full. It was full because I executed it and I actually pulled it off, and I didn't know if I could. But it was more full because the women that were all there and everybody that showed up participated, and they broke out of their comfort zone, and they took one step closer to embracing their superpowers. And they took a bigger step into becoming even more of who they're meant to be. And for me, watching that, when you see the light bulb click, when you see a little bit of ice melt physically from someone's heart, and you see it warm up a little bit, like how they talk about the Grinch and how his heart grew a few inches, and being able to witness that and know that you helped create that, it's a high like no other. It's an overwhelming feeling of love, which I'm a very firm believer is the most powerful drug that exists to man. The most.
Yeah, make you do crazy
things.
So
love will take you crazy places.
let me ask, Slay Day round 2.
It's in the works. I'd actually like to have it on a more frequent basis. I'd at least like to have it annually. There's a lot of work that goes into it, a lot of behind the scenes stuff. What most people didn't know showing up to Slay Day, I was literally up until about 4 o'clock that morning, and then was back up and out of the door by 8 o'clock, putting the rest of the stuff together. So I think the only thing that kept me going was adrenaline. Like, that's it. That and being on autopilot. Because it was great. And I definitely want to do it again. The women loved it. I definitely want to be able to get a larger space. I really hope this time around I get an even larger turnout. You know, I got great feedback from the girls. You know, part of the things that I did, I had put a workbook together for Slay Day so that the women could keep up with where I was at. And it had different worksheets that went along with the workshops that we were working on. But one of the things that I had in that was asking for feedback. I want to know what women want to know more about. And they could do it anonymously. It was a section in the workbook they got to rip out and hand in. They got to give me what they liked, what they didn't like, and what they wanted to see more of.
So what did you learn?
What did I learn as far as what the women wanted?
Yeah, off the feedback.
I learned that women felt amazing and that they didn't expect it to go as it did. They were very uncomfortable coming in. And they just asked for more of what I did, you know, and just bringing more of that too. Now, I'll be honest, I don't want to do the same workshops that I did. I want to keep it current. I want to tap into different areas and different pieces every time, because not only do I want the same women coming back, you know, I created a forum on Facebook for all the women who I've now called slayed. They've been slayed. They came in and they went through Slay Day. They graduated, so to speak, from Slay Day. You know, I just look to provide them with the tools. But coming into it now, you know, going back, or in the future, you know, being able to look back a year previously and saying, okay, well, where were you at then versus where you are now? You know, I'm hoping that I did have vendors and stuff there. Like I said, I wanted to give women a platform to highlight and show off what they do, part of what their talents are. Get the word out there, you know, again, give them the platform to do it. I'm hoping to be able to do that for more women in the future. That maybe somebody went, and that's the thing too. You don't know what you don't know. And if you don't travel outside of your comfort zone on your own, sometimes you need a helping hand. So I wanted to be able to put women in a room with other women that had a similar path. And I when I say path, I don't necessarily mean the same destination, because we're all obviously going to different places. But every woman in that room had at least one thing in common. And that was that they were looking and striving to be a better version of themselves. And that in itself formed a connection and a bond. And then as they talked and as we went around the room and we did different workshops, women found out that they had more things in common with women that they would have never even considered having a conversation with prior to that day. So I put up the forum so that everybody could keep in contact, so I could keep in contact with them. Eventually build it into its own community so that we can depend on each other no matter where we're at in the world. You know, there were even women that traveled down, I want to say from Maryland, had car trouble, got stranded the night before, and she told me there was no way I was missing this. And she said she was all for another one. And I wanted a place where women could remain and hold on to that feeling of what they felt and the empowerment they felt that day and the love that they felt that day from other women.
Yeah, as an attendee myself, I felt the love. I felt the focus. We had a focus word. And I think, and I want to encourage you to do a second year and have us retouch that. See how we've grown in 1 year and continue with the community, because as women, we need other women.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because like I said, I think we all go through similar struggles. But if you're not willing to open up and talk about it, how would anybody know?
Yeah, I think Slay Day, your event, created an environment comfortable for women to do that, to be themselves.
And that for me, I think, was the greatest part, because that was my biggest fear, was women feeling uncomfortable. And I made it very clear. And I mean, Kate, you can probably totally relate to that, because I said it countless, or should I say that you can vouch for that, because I said it countless times throughout. There is a zero tolerance for any negativity. Those were my two main rules. The only thing that you had to bring with you in coming to Slay Day was your ticket, because that was your entry, and a positive attitude. You know, along with an open mind. Outside of that, you didn't need anything else. I provided everything else. I was totally okay with providing everything else. And as stressful as it was worth it, you know. And I was glad that the girls had a great time. I was glad to see all the feedback. I was glad to watch women embrace each other. Like, to the point where it, like, made me tear up at the end giving my closing statement. Yeah. All my emotions were, like, overflowing.
Emotional A.
Yep, emotional A.
But I think we needed that here in this region, because we don't have too many of those events. Mm-hmm. It needs to be everywhere.
Absolutely.
So just a community together. Let me ask you, and I'm looking forward to Slay Day round 2, and I hope that you just maybe get a team of ladies together to delegate some of your work so it's not so overbearing.
That would probably be a smart thing to do.
Assign people different portions, and then it'd be even bigger. I want to thank you for your vulnerability that you had today.
Absolutely.
On today's episode. I want to thank you for being you.
Absolutely.
Being who you are, transparent, strong, bold, powerful, a warrior in the trenches, out of the trenches, open to talk about, always lending an ear, wanting to see the gold in everybody.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate your heart. I appreciate your vulnerability. Let me ask you this closing question, A.
All right. What's up?
What makes you uncommon?
Well, so here's the thing, right? Women as a whole, I believe that we're all uncommon because, again, we have our own superpowers, you know, and mine isn't the same as yours. And you having one doesn't make mine any less powerful or vice versa. So I believe all women are uncommon. We all bring different parts and pieces to the table. And if we could just figure out how to make those pieces fit or find out where we fit, the bigger picture is so much more beautiful. But if I was forced to speak just about me and not all of us amazing women as a whole, I would say that my superpower seems to be my heart. and the way that I'm willing to give and the loyalty that I have to people, even people that have done me wrong or betrayed me, the willingness to forgive, the willingness to continue to spread love and embrace love. That I think would be my superpower, because I am always up to help someone else before I help someone else. Before I help myself. And that's not something that anybody has ever been able to take from me. And I'm very, very grateful, because I think so many times we shut down and we shut ourselves out. And it's okay if you have to do that temporarily, close down and shut down for spiritual maintenance and for sanity's sake. But the key is to reopen that and not to allow others and what they're going through impact you to the point that you just shut down and you close everyone out and you don't allow yourself to feel and you don't allow yourself to help out. I would have to say, if I would encourage women to go out and do anything, I would say, be great, be bold, be unapologetically yourself. Because by being who you really are, you will attract all the right people. The people that are meant to be there will stay. The people that are meant to go will go. And I know it's not easy. I know it's not easy to let people go. But learn to love people from a distance. Stop sacrificing yourself for everything and everyone around you. Be who you are and let who's meant to be there gravitate towards you. Allow your blessings to gravitate towards you. And just remain strong. Women endure so much and can endure so much. So in those moments when you're weak, one of the things, and I have to throw this out there as a suggestion as in closing, but something new that I started with my daughter more recently is every morning when we're getting ready, we stand in the mirror doing the superhero pose. And if for those of you who may not know what that is, you stand with your legs apart and with your fists on your hips, with your chest poked out, and you're ready to face the day. And we just say, we're going to accept whatever comes our way, and we're going to do it in stride. And we're going to learn what we need to learn, and even though we may stumble, we will get back up. So, talk to yourself. It's okay. Send yourself some inspiring messages. Post some things. I have notes written all around my house. If you have to do post-it notes, do post-it notes. Post-it notes. Set yourself reminders in your phone. Just remind yourself that you're amazing. And your superpower is that there is no other person in the world exactly like you. It's not. It's just you. So with that being said, I will stop talking, because if you let me go, I will go forever. But again, just thanking Uncommon Women for having this podcast, for being able to reach out to women all over the world. Guys, tune in. I will gladly keep the ladies updated on Slay Day Part 2. If you're in the Pennsylvania, specifically the Reading area, around the time, or you want to fly in, by all means, all are welcome. I don't care what your path or what your walk of life is or where it's been. The most important thing is that it's led you up into that moment, and that's all that matters to me. So to Uncommon Women, just thank you, and just keep doing what you guys are doing, because it's amazing in itself. And I feel like we need outlets. We need those outlets for all women all over the place. So just thank you for having me. Anytime you guys want me to come back, just let me know when, and I am here.
Thank you again, A, for being on our podcast. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in to Uncommon Women. So, ladies,
stay uncommon.